Okay, all right. I think that we are live on YouTube now. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is April the 24th, and it is 6:43, and we're calling the meeting of the West Virginia Democratic Party Rules and Bylaws Committee meeting um, to order. So the first thing that I want to do is to take attendance. Bob Robert Baker.
Yes, yes, here.
Dottie Berger, he was not able to be here this evening. He had a previous engagement. Matt Halterman.
Present.
Thank you. Deb McCarthy.
Present.
Maria Russo, she's not on here. I messaged her earlier, so she might jump on. Judy Stevens.
Here.
Selena Vickers, I'm here. And Ray Whiting.
Here.
Okay, awesome. And we have a quorum. Let me share. I think everybody received the agenda. Here's I hope that showed up on the screen. Did you see the agenda up there? Okay, all right. So here's the agenda, approval of the agenda. Old business, we have attendance and proxies as it relates to removal and the Board of Appeals. New business, we have a referral from the State Executive Committee, and then we want to have a discussion about the next meeting prior to adjourn. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any opposed?
Sorry, I cut you off.
Okay, I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. This is adopted. Okay. All right. So first thing that we're going to look at on this agenda is this attendance proxy. So I know this looks very, very messy. It does look very, very messy. So anything in black is the original language. Anything in red is language that we have previously, looked at, and then in purple were our recent kind of musings around that. So I just wanted to, there was a couple things that here that I wanted to look at. First, this right here, to see if we had talked at one point about having proxies be from anywhere in the state, any Democrat in the state. And so there's been some discussion about having it be somebody who could be a proxy would be any member of the state executive committee, or anybody who is a resident of their political subdivision. So example of political subdivision would be Debbie is, let me use Bob because I know his Senate district. Bob is a member of the state executive committee by virtue of being his district is his state Senate district 9. So that's his political subdivision. So he could utilize any Democrat in his state Senate district as a proxy, or anybody who is a member of the state executive committee. And what that does, it allows him the way that the bylaws are currently, it's the political subdivision, like his state Senate district. But we have situations like somebody's in District 16, way up in the Panhandle, and there's a meeting somewhere in the state, and it's a 6-hour drive or 5-hour drive, and that's very, very difficult. And so if the people in those very distant counties could utilize somebody who's already going to the state executive committee as a proxy, especially somebody who they know the issues because they're on the state executive committee, that is helpful. So it gives options, of options to the member um, to have representation. So how do you, let's have a little discussion about that.
I feel like opening the universe for your proxy options is good, especially when the people who are in that universe are informed and engaged. I think it just makes it easier and lets us have a fuller attendance. Like when people can't find a proxy, you're absent. But if you have a proxy, you're actually there. So I think it's a good thing.
Okay. So you like this language?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Other discussion? I don't see hands, so somebody will just have to speak. I'm sorry. Okay. So I don't think anybody's okay. So it looks like that language is okay. So the other part of this is that I wanted to look at is we have here the current bylaws do not specify limits on proxy. And so we had discussed limiting one person per proxy. Is that still where we want to hold? And what our recommendation to the state executive committee be?
Well, I remember when I was trying to find a proxy for myself at a meeting, and I guess it was around the end of September, early October, that I couldn't be present at. It was hard to find one. And people were calling around trying to, I think Christy was going to be my proxy, and then she couldn't go. And she tried to appoint Deb as her proxy, and she couldn't go either, as it turned out. And so we wound up just being absent. Which also makes me wonder, it'd be good if some people could hold more than one proxy anyway. Like state executive committee members could hold more than one, but maybe not just local Democrats that are not on the committee already.
So I was contacted by 4 or 5 people to hold their proxies for that meeting. And I got cold feet because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be holding these handfuls of proxies. I don't know if that's kosher. So my question about this is something for us to think about. What if you could hold multiple proxies, but those proxies must be instructed? Because I don't think somebody should hold 5, 4, 5, 3, 4, or 5 uninstructed proxies. That means that one person has 3, 4, or 5 votes that are up to that one person. That's my only issue. Like if the proxies were instructed, I'm pretty good with that. Uninstructed, not so much.
I agree with that. I do.
I mean, uninstructed could sway a vote. If 4 or 5 people in the room hold 3 or 4 or 5 proxies and they're uninstructed, nah, I have a problem with that.
I agree with Deb. On the other hand, instructive proxies are always problematical because things come up that are not part of the instructions. So I would say maybe I don't think people should have more than 2 or 3 proxies at the most, generally speaking. Whether they need to be instructed or not, I don't know, but I'm thinking it would be helpful to have state committee members that are not from the district be able to hold a couple of proxies anyway, or 3 maybe.
And just so you know, the DNC limits it to one.
But
And
DNC limits it to one.
their rule is that only members, of course, they have like 500 almost 500 members, but only members can hold proxies for other members, and they can only hold one. Just, I'm not pushing anything one way or the other. I'm just letting you know what their policy is.
Aren't we supposed to follow as much as we possibly can what the DNC does?
Well,
It's supposed to be a guideline.
so there are things like effective notice and affirmative action and things like that we are absolutely, like, we have to do that. Things like quorum and proxy and stuff like that, like those are listed like specifically in the DNC business section, as opposed to that the DNC has to follow, as opposed to like the charter and the part of the bylaws that have to do with um, how we're supposed to like run a party. You see what I'm saying? So yes, so to answer your question, yes, but on the minutia of things like proxies, we're not required to do that. Now, we may very well want to. I mean, we do look to them, and we have tried to mirror a lot of their policy that we feel like is good. So we very well might want to do that. But on something like that, we don't absolutely have to do that if we don't want to.
And I wanted to make a comment about what Bob said about, things that come up and the instructed proxies and that kind of stuff. In a situation, if you're holding like 2-3 proxies and something would come up that you wouldn't have instructions on, the instruction maybe should be that they abstain and not vote, because they don't know what the person they're holding would want.
Mac, I think I see your hand.
For as far as what to do with instructed proxies and things that come up, discussion we had over a year ago, what is a well-written proxy? And a well-written proxy would include a sentence that says, in the event of unintended or unlisted items, you either abstain or you vote according to the proxy holder's conscience. I mean, it gets back to, and this was the discussion before this discussion of well-written proxies. And thinking back to how this discussion came about, I mean, we arrived at the idea of anyone holding proxies because we were talking about individual rights as members, and this idea of access to meetings. And everyone in here that's debated so far has referenced a particular meeting that happened a while back where we had installed in the bylaws an accessibility clause that we all interpreted as giving us a right to Zoom into meetings that wasn't acted upon. And now we're sitting here making decisions based upon the actions that the assembly or the executive committee as a whole did on, well, we now see that we don't have that access. And we now see that due to the geography of the state, something that's outside of our control as rules and bylaws, we do have a problem with getting members access to people who can go to these meetings, who can hold a proxy. I see a massive complication in logistics for the secretary in delineating a difference in how many proxies someone can hold that's uninstructed versus instructed.
Yeah, that's very in the weeds.
Yeah. And when it comes to a proxy, I mean, you're trusting someone to act on your behalf. And it gets back to that idea of individual member rights. And if that person is holding 5 proxies, I have to trust that there's a reason that person's holding 5 proxies. Yeah, it might sway a vote, but if that person was here and the person holding their proxies truly was the best person to represent them, the vote's going to turn out the same way anyway. I mean, it might not look as democratic or as transparent, but truly, if the representatives that have been elected are doing their job, those votes aren't going to be swaying just because someone's holding a proxy. I'm not particular on any way we swing on this. I'm just kind of throwing my 2 cents out as experience. As someone who's been through this before, I think delineating between types of proxies will put a lot of pressure on arguably the position that works the hardest already in the party, and that's the secretary. And I would be cautious of putting a position that already has a lot of work, even more work on it, especially impromptu work, because we all know proxies can be an up to last minute thing. That's my 2 cents. I support however this goes down getting put in, just so something gets put in that and sent in that is an appropriate change.
Mac, what do you think about how many proxies a person should be able to hold? What's been your experience on that?
The thing about it is the larger an organization gets, how many proxies a person holds becomes a factor. The ways it can become a problem is a factor of 2 things. What defines a quorum and exactly how large the society is. And we talked about this in our very first meeting in defining a quorum. The smaller a quorum, the smaller the majority needs to be to effectively make change. So if the bylaws that we have, I believe, are 40%, Selena, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
40.
So that makes your effective working majority 20% plus 1 vote, which for us, we have like 96 voting members, if I remember right. So that puts you at 48, cut that in half. That's 25 votes for a working majority. So someone who can hold 4 or 5 proxies, that might be a problem. But I would call that a quorum issue and not a proxy issue too. That might be a bit more lawyer-esque an answer than I usually give. But in my experience, the larger the organization, a large organization with a high quorum, the amount of proxy you hold matters less. The smaller the organization, proxies matter a lot more. I think we're at a size where no one should hold more than 5. 5 is just an obscene limit to me. But at the same time, given the accessibility issue and the real world issue of making physical meetings across the state that can take upwards of 6 hours to drive, depending on where you are in the state, which we might have a choice in, but be for real, do we have an actual choice in where we live in the state? That's an issue. So I would say I'm comfortable with 3 as a personal opinion. I'm not beholden to that number.
Yeah, I kind of agree with him. I think 5's a little bit too much.
Well,
I mean, if it becomes as the New York delegation in 1887 or in 1787 found out, if it becomes a damned issue, you can always just say no proxies.
I would
mean,
not
get
be
rid of it.
unhappy. I would not be unhappy about that. I'll be honest. I think people need to show up to meetings. And I know that things happen. I do, but I just so you know, I mean, my opinion is I kind of like this, one person. I have no issue. I don't think anybody did anything wrong at that meeting. Troy carried, got a lot of attention because he carried 4. There was a grievance filed about that, but like, it was from the most furthest, county. And of the 4 that he carried, they were instructed, and 2 went one for 2 people who were up for election, and 2 went for the other. So there was no abuse of it whatsoever. I don't think anybody did anything wrong. But I think that this getting passed with the attendance policy as a whole will fix a lot of the problems. I mean, the fact that the people that are absent a lot, that always send proxies, I think that's going to over time diminish, because if they don't show up, in whether if it's virtual or in person, if they don't themselves show up, then they're going to be off the committee and we'll be electing somebody new to replace them. So I think I kind of feel okay with only having one, because one, I think that's what the state executive committee wants. And especially some of the ones who've been around, because even though that wasn't official policy, that I think it was sort of like unspoken policy or something like that. It's just sort of what they did without it being in writing. So I think they would feel more comfortable with it. But I also think it's not necessarily going to be a big of an issue because of the attendance policy. So those are my thoughts on it. Deb?
So is there any kind of policy about offering a Zoom option for every meeting? I think a lot of this could be avoided proxy wise if people had a Zoom option for every meeting.
That is a huge issue, Deb, and no, there's not. And I have a lot of issue with abuse of Zoom, of virtual meetings, that I think that we are going to have to address, because I know there's, some people want that to be an option, but I remember what it was like when, when we did, then they were like, what I call the good guys did not have the majority. And I feel like I've seen Zoom meetings be abused by the administration. And I think we have to be very, very careful about that. Yes, it's an accessibility issue, but it's also a democracy issue. And so I think we have to really, really dig into that, to make it anyway. So yeah, so to answer your question, there is not a Zoom option for all. What we do have is the policy that says, you kitty cat, that there are basically 4, aside from emergency meetings or special meetings, there are 2 meetings in person and 2 meetings that are electronic or conference call. So half and half.
Okay. I'm just going to say this. We started offering a Zoom option for our county meetings, our DEC meetings in the county. It has exploded. People take advantage of that and there's more participation. I don't think we experience any proxy issues with Zoom. It's not like people are sending proxies by Zoom. But the participation has been great. And so democracy wise, I think the Zoom option really increases our reach. The ripple gets bigger. Mm-hmm. So there's that factor.
There's been a lot of conversation up here too because of accessibility. One of the people I'm talking about.
Yeah, Warren. I talked to him pretty regularly.
Feeling that, some people, not everybody can physically attend meetings, so they feel like they should have that option available to them just so that they can participate. I know there are a lot of times that, I don't like to drive. I really don't. So going to meetings, having to go physically to meetings is very nerve-wracking for me.
Well, we're definitely going to address that that issue, and we're going to have to, and we should, and it's in the year 2024 and post COVID, we have to figure this out, and again in a fair way. So we don't have to answer this question tonight if you guys don't want to, or but anyway, so the wording we have right now is one person may hold one proxy, and so if folks feel strongly that we change that, we can do that. If folks, and I always say to you guys, we have to get this passed. It's not just us; it's us handful that we have to have 2/3 of the committee agree with us. So
Yeah, devil's advocate time.
yeah.
This is how we feel, but what about that person over there? What are they going to say? Because look at the attendance thing and all the row we went through with that.
Yeah.
So,
but we've some ideas have been thrown out. If anybody wants to say yes, let's change this, then one, you can do it now. If you want to think about it and us do it at the next meeting, that's fine. But anything that anybody wants to do right now?
I think one person, one proxy is reasonable and safe and wise.
And it does help out that we're suggesting a change to include members of the executive committee in addition to residents of our political subdivision.
Yeah.
makes it easier.
Yeah. And it engages more people. People like to be included. This is a way to include people at a level that they haven't been included before. I think it's a good thing.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts? Go ahead.
Could I run an idea just crazily? If we were to provide an exemption to the one proxy, one member, one proxy, perhaps this might be a way to include our at-large members in a more valuable way. How would anyone feel about that?
I'm not sure what that means
If we were to provide, like, say, an exemption that at-large could hold up to 3, because they do represent the entire state. How would everyone feel about that? And I'm just throwing this out to talk. I'm not saying I advocate for it. I'm just a thought.
Do at large have a vote?
Yes.
I get kind of confused on those sometimes.
Well, playing devil's advocate, I mean, I just fundamentally, I don't have an issue with it, but the playing devil's advocate, the things that I think would come into play is that then when people would say, okay, well, let's say Troy has and Cindy Lavender Bow each have their 3, and I need a proxy. I can't find a proxy. I feel like Cindy Lavender Bow would be great for me, would represent what I want, but she can't carry anymore, right? I might also say it's not fair for for these people to have that and another group not have it. Like I feel like it could be, once you give an exception to one group, then other people could start saying, well, I want that exception too. You know what I mean? And I think it could snowball. And then the whole issue of us trying to limit the proxies may get difficult. Anyway, so those are just kind of my thought on that.
Yeah, I think it would become a damned if you do and damned if you don't type scenario. There would be people who would be for it, and then there were people who would be really against it. So,
and I could also see like people who didn't vote for Cindy or didn't vote for Troy being really against it, as opposed, you know what I mean? that it might become a personality thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also have to think about the fact that, there's now 9 of us in the Eastern Panhandle, and a lot of these meetings are going to be held down Charleston. Just thinking logistics of how many people would actually have to attend to cover that, and how much would it cost. So the geography question is one of those things outside of the black and white, just throwing out options. So.
For one of the smallest states in the union, we sure have to travel a long ways to do anything.
Yeah, I'm thankful every day that Corridor H will soon be finished to Elkins, and that will ease quite a bit of this. But until then, and
what will be the travel time then?
that would take easily an hour off travel time, just right off the top, and that's not even accounting for anything else here. I'll get back to you on that because I'm curious.
It's okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's just keep our brain thinking about this and see if there's if there's anything else differently that we want to do. But we still have time at the next meeting if we want to change that. Okay. All right. So the other piece of this that I wanted us to look at is our attendance policy. So members who miss 3 consecutive meetings or 5 total meetings have failed to meet the minimum level of attendance, which shall be good cause for removal. So we've already said that. And what we knew that we needed to do is to add in a due process piece. So we put in violations of this attendance provision will promptly be referred to the Board of Appeals. So in talking with others and trying to process this and make sure it's, as perfect as we can be, here's some questions that I have. And Bob, you may be able, well, anybody can answer this, but I'm kind of thinking Bob kind of took the helm of this initially. But does it have to be referred immediately to the Board of Appeals? And if so, by who? And wouldn't it, as long as there is an option for due process, do we have to go to the Board of Appeals? So in other words, if I miss 3 consecutive meetings, and let's just say like something happened and I've dropped off the face of the earth and I'm not responding to emails, I'm not coming to any meetings. Why can't I just be removed and given like the option that I can file for consideration with the Board of Appeals rather than it being immediately referred to the Board of Appeals? Does that make sense? Like if I want to take it for due process, I can, but why waste the Board of Appeals time if I'm just off the face of the earth anyway? Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. It's a question really of who has the burden of pushing it forward, or dealing with it, whether the person who has been missing meetings has the burden of requesting Board of Appeals review, or whether it automatically goes to the board and we have the burden of establishing that they've missed the meetings. As far as who it's referred by, I would suggest the secretary, because the secretary is the person who's keeping track of all that stuff.
And I have a thought process too. This is based around the state committee, which meets 4 times a year. Most of the county committees meet monthly.
Right.
So, I mean, missing 3 consecutive meetings with the state, that's almost a year's worth, where 3 in a county, that's only 3 months.
I think counties would have to create their own rules on this.
They would. They'll have to come up with their own policies.
Then we would need to make that statement. I think we would need to add that statement to a county's, stating the counties are responsible for their policy on this, or however you want to word it. Because of the
think
fact that
we
they meet
built-
more often.
I think that we built that in, but I'm gonna, between now and next time, I'm gonna go back and look at that to see exactly how we said that.
As,
But we had, go ahead, I'm sorry.
as far as this appeal is concerned, how do we envision the Board of Appeals dealing with it? Would they send out a letter to the person that's been referred, asking them to show some kind of cause for missing the meetings, or what? Or some sort of proof
Yeah,
that they
and that's
actually
exactly what
didn't miss the meeting?
yeah, and that's exactly like if somebody isn't showing up and isn't doing their stuff anyway and doesn't care, why put all that work on the Board of Appeals to have to do stuff and to have to hold a hearing and do, all the stuff that goes into. I mean, I think it's absolutely fine to do that if somebody feels like they were wronged and they want to do that. But upon like really talking and think about this, it seems like we're putting a burden on them that may not be necessary if a person just accepts that they're not going to be on the committee. I guess my big question to you, Bob, is based on the ruling of Judge Tabbitt. I think it's Judge Tabbitt.
Oh, I'd have to go back and look at that again before I could say.
Yeah,
It was Judge Tabbitt.
yeah, but if you could look at that, but if I think, I mean, maybe this could say violation of this attendance policy shall promptly, let's see, shall result in a letter from the secretary to the individual. This is not the right language, but to the individual, including the process for appealing the decision to the Board of Appeals or something. So it puts the burden on the member, but gives them that due process.
Yeah, for them to proceed on whether or not they want to go forward or not. The only alternative would be if the secretary automatically sent it to the Board of Appeals. Would be for the Board of Appeals to send out a letter stating, this has been presented to us. Do you wish to continue on with this process? To the person that, it regards. But I mean, that's adding extra work. It's not really necessary if, the secretary contacts them and say, do you want to be a part of the committee? If not, this is your.
One of the key things to me is to make sure that the person has some kind of actual notice of what's happening to them. That because if they don't have that, then due process isn't satisfied at all.
Okay.
Do we want that to be 30 days or 14 days or?
Well, in terms of what the time is to appeal,
Notification that they're going to be struck from the registration or the membership. And that they have the option to appeal it.
I don't have a very strong opinion about any of this. Mac has his hand up. Maybe he does.
Oh, I didn't see his hand. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mac.
You didn't see it because I believe Bob had supervision and saw it as soon as I put it up.
Okay.
See, I think you raise a good point about, well, okay, we have the Board of Appeals reach out and say what's going on. I mean, even if the person gives a good reason for missing, they still miss 3 meetings. The effect is still going to be the same. And that's why I kind of disagree with the premise of the Talbot ruling at its heart is there was no bylaws, there was no comment on it in the Republican bylaws, so there was no way for there to even be a due process. Whereas here, there is an explicit set down of the expectation is set, you miss 3 meetings, you're out. The secretary informs you you're out, because that's the secretary's baseline job, is you have been struck from the rolls. Then the secretary informs the chair calls for elections to fill the seat. You can go to the bylaws and appeal it, but the burden of proof is on you to say this has been a mistake, because that's the only way it doesn't get upheld, is for you to say the secretary's roles are wrong. Here's the video evidence from the recorded meetings that I was there. Because it's the only instance this gets overturned. The onus should not be on us to prove, like, for us to contact you and be like, hey, what's up? It should be on you to, you should have the option to, if there is a problem with the roles and you were in fact there, be able to pursue due process and get reinstated. But it should be, the onus should be on the person being ejected. It should not be on us to prove that you weren't there, when the only thing we're going to do in the Board of Appeals is, one, if it's a person who hasn't been showing up, they don't show up, it gets ruled against them anyway, because that's how the Board of Appeals new rule system works. They don't show up, they didn't defend their case, it's automatically ruled against them. Or we show up, you show up, and then we say, bylaws says you missed 3 meetings, here's the rules for the last 3 meetings. There's no defense against that. It's a black and white issue. So to me, it makes no sense for us to carry the onus to Board of Appeals. It should be on them to prove something's wrong if they so choose. That's my take on it.
And do you think it's reasonable, Mac, for for them to be sent a letter informing them and of that there's a violation of the bylaws of the attendance policy, and they'll be removed, however they have the option to appeal, like, as long as we give them
Yeah,
the
that, I mean,
information.
that should be, there's explicit and implied clauses. That's an implied clause, is the duty of the secretary, because the secretary manages the roles. So yes, the secretary would send a letter to be like, yo, you're off.
Well, should we send them a warning saying you've missed 2 meetings in a row, 1 more and you will be stricken?
I think that's a fair discussion to have. I would be okay with them receiving it, but I also don't think that if it doesn't get sent, that should be grounds for it to be overturned.
That's exactly, I think, what I thought. That's also putting a lot of work on the secretary to,
Yeah, and I mean,
send that out.
the secretary is already the hardest working position in almost any organization. And I mean, if we want to put in that it would, I mean, I would be fine including a line saying, upon missing 2 meetings in a row, the secretary shall attempt to, or shall send a letter, or shall attempt to send a letter informing you that you are near whatever grounds for removal under the attendance policy, however you want to word that. But I would include a clause after that saying, whether or not the secretary sends that, the onus is on the member to know their status of whether or not they're in good standing. And that's what we're talking about. And it would not overturn them missing. It would not be grounds to overturn them missing 3 meetings either. You have a responsibility as a member of an organization. Us more so, because we're elected into the organization. We chose to be here. You have an onus of responsibility. And yes, we can clause the secretary to have a duty that they might have to reach out to you, but that doesn't override your responsibility of self to your position. That's a basic premise of a working democracy.
Well, I'm not thrilled about putting that and having that clause in for the secretary's responsibility. But what the DNC does, and I think is probably might be something that we could do. We could talk to Ryan and Mike about. But at every meeting, they as right when they call the roll, they go over the attendance policy. They read the attendance policy so that people know that what the attendance policy is. So it's not like people are, there are a lot of people who just never go to the bylaws and look at the bylaws. So this wouldn't necessarily require them to do it. But it would be a reminder at every meeting that there is an attendance policy and that proxies do not count toward the attendance.
It would have to be short and sweet.
Yeah, it would be reading this paragraph. Members who miss 3 consecutive meetings or 5 total meetings have failed to meet the minimum level of attendance and whatever else we decide, and that proxies, while important, and count towards quorum, but they don't count towards attendance.
I mean, and we don't even have to put that in the bylaws. That could be a standing rule that we pass at a meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, that doesn't even have to go to this level of
Exactly.
rules badgering. It could just be a standing rule or a custom that we put in as a quick vote.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
was just trying to think in terms of what due process would mean. And I think what a member would need to have the right to do would be to prove that they were present at those meetings.
Mhm.
Because anybody can say they missed 3 meetings, but if they didn't, they ought to have a right to challenge that finding. I mean, that's what due process is about in this sort of a situation. Because who knows, if people may get it wrong in terms of whether they were or weren't actually present in person,
Mhm.
since proxies don't count.
That's where the Zoom comes in handy because it's recorded. In-person meetings, I mean, you'd have to count on witnesses and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. Well, Bob, will you take this little section right here and just look at that and maybe draft language that you think would be appropriate and send that out to us?
Let me
that
ask. I will look at it. You'll have to send this to me as a doc again.
Okay.
But let me ask one more thing about this. Do we want this to apply only to regular meetings, or do we want it to apply to also special meetings? And
I would think only regular. Special meetings are, they're, you never know when one's going to come up. So I don't think it'd be right to include those.
I
okay,
think that's reasonable. What do everybody else think?
I mean, I would put in the first line where it says who missed 3 consecutive, I would add regular there, or 5 total regular meetings, if that makes sense to people.
Is that okay with folks? Is there
Mhm.
it's not a vote, but just a sense of the committee? Is that okay? I can't see everybody, so if anybody disagrees, please speak up.
Well, 5 regular meetings would be over a year's worth of meetings, a year and a whole quarter. And I think if you miss 3 meetings, you are not engaged. If there hasn't been a communication or a proxy sent, you just don't attend. You're not engaged. You're not serious about this. I don't think we should be adult babysitting. I think you need to cut the cord at 3, just like you're done.
Okay, and what about organizational meetings? I mean, I think that should be counted.
You're not engaged. You're not participating. We'll find somebody else to do the job. This is a job, and you are elected into this position. You owe it to your constituents to show up.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of think we should just keep it simple. I mean,
Keep it simple. 3, done.
But if
whether
you're
it's
going to
regular
do,
or special.
if you're going to do 3, would they necessarily have to be consecutive? Because, yeah, Mac.
We have already had this debate, and I don't want to go down the weeds of trying to come to the same compromise we came to before. but it was if I remember correctly, we discussed it in terms of um 3 consecutive meetings or 5 total. 5 being of the 16 total that you would have in an elected term. So that's that's almost a third, or more than a third. Well, it's almost a third. I remember us talking about special meetings, and I think we came to the consensus that it would apply to all meetings. Because whenever we were discussing it, we talked about the math of, well, it's 3 consecutive to trigger. So you can miss a meeting, come to a meeting, miss a meeting, come to a meeting. And before you get to 5, you're pretty much through the term of 4 years that we're elected. You're not all the way through, but you're very close. And this was kind of that happy compromise of you have a reasonable expectation to show up to at least some, and you'll get pretty much through your term, is how I remember this conversation going. If anyone has a different recollection, I'd love to hear it, because I think we talked about this over a year ago.
Well, we had a long talk about this.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to relitigate that same talk again.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it doesn't matter whether it's special. If some people can't make a special meeting, and it's a reasonable thing. But it's not just missing a special meeting, it's missing a special meeting and other things that has built on it. So I think, just for simplicity's sake, I think what we came up with before I think it's good language. I really do.
I don't remember the discussion, but I'm getting old and I trust Mac's remembrance.
Okay. Well, the main part of that is that part of it, and Bob's going to look at that. Okay. All right. So the other thing that I wanted us to just, before we, commit to everything, how this fits related to.
Can I ask one more question?
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about special meetings, does that include candidate recruitment and that kind of stuff? Because I didn't attend a lot.
No, those aren't state executive committee meetings. Those are just membership updates.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Proceed.
I think I'm gonna look at this first. Okay, so removal of a member, just want to make sure this is where this what we just talked about applies. In terms of removal of a member, good cause shall include but not be restricted to, and we just added failure to comply with attendance policy provided for in section 3. I think that language is still appropriate. Is there any disagreement about that?
No.
Okay. All right. And the other place, and this may change based on this discussion. This falls under the duties of the Board of Appeals, that the board shall hear and determine by a majority vote all decisions and controversies appealed from any club, blah, 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 as well as violations of attendance policy provided for.
You can make that as well as appeals from violations of the attendance part. Let's see. Whoops. As we go, yeah.
Okay. Great. I think that does that. Okay. All right. Anything? Hold on just a second. This is really weird. It says new share. I never mind. I think I'm gonna hit stop share. Okay. All right. That is good. So, last thing on our agenda is a referral that we had from at the last state executive committee. We were referred, and I'm just going to read specifically what the referral says. The issue concerning historically underrepresented groups in the state of West Virginia shall be referred to the Rules and Bylaws Committee for review and recommendations. So this is based on the appeal that was presented to the state executive committee at the last regular meeting. I think it's a very important issue. I think it's very important for us to be fair and equitable in how we proceed and the recommendations that we make. I'll be honest, I think that there are probably, because the diversity caucuses and the affirmative action committee and all that is relatively new to West Virginia. Other states have different policies and have addressed this in different ways. Anyway, I'm not sure. I don't have language to present right now. In some ways, I feel like we need to maybe talk to some other people, look at some other language, some other policies, some other bylaws from other states, maybe even talk to DNC. I don't know. But I'll open this up for discussion, and I'd be very interested to know what your thoughts are on and recommendations on how for us to proceed.
Because we're so new at this, I think we should do some fact and experience gathering before we launch into this, find out how other states have handled this. And it might be beneficial to compare how states who have long-standing affirmative action committees compared to states who are fairly new at this, what the difference in experience is with them.
It might also be helpful to reach out to the DNC and see how they handle their various underrepresented group caucuses.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you could do, Selena?
I'd be glad to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What about other states? I think that's a great idea, Deb.
Unfortunately, we are new at this.
Yeah.
How did we come in at the end of this when we should have been working on it since the 1970s, 1980s? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going to learn because
Yeah.
people have had experience before us, so we can learn
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah,
We were supposed to have this in 1972 and
Yep.
never.
Yeah, and when we got them in 2021, I think we were in the middle of a major, I hate to say fight, but I mean, it was like really, really intense, and there wasn't real negotiation, and like language got put in the bylaws, and everything we were having to move like really, really, really quick, and anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that was a hot mess, that meeting was.
Yeah, Mac.
Well, I will say, I mean, yes, we're new to this, but having glanced at other places and bylaws and looked at how our things are done, ours are very, very progressive, very liberal, and very generous. And we're new to this. Let's also commend what we do have. I am a member of the community, and I was a member of the caucus that brought the challenge, even though I sided against the challenge. As someone who has a lot of Native American blood, I'm happy to have any level of representation and any level of that community's voice being heard in a way that's taken seriously. And I have found it, maybe not liberating is the right word, but comforting in that looking out across this executive committee there are so many minority voices, not just from my community, but from other communities that get heard, that get taken seriously, that see their issues advance. So when it comes to the issue of how to handle this, we are doing a pretty good job. We have some niche cases that have grinded the gears. Now it's time to file the gears and do the nuance work. But don't rag too hard on yourselves, guys. It's pretty good as it is, especially looking out across the landscape. So good job.
Well, thank you. And, and just so you know, I mean, in terms of representation, there is dramatically better representation on the state executive committee by historically underrepresented groups than there was, say, 5 or 6 years ago. And so really, really have made leaps and bounds in that. And I'm very, very proud of West Virginia for that. So thank you for that reminder, Mac. Okay, so I think what I heard is let's do some digging and talking and looking at how other folks have moved forward with this, and then come back to this group and look at that. Does that sound? Is that what I'm hearing from folks?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, that's good. I may lean on some of you all for help with that. Okay. All right. So the last thing on our agenda is scheduling our next meeting. So I'm going to be gone for a little bit, and then I think Bob is getting ready to go to France because he's our resident jet setter.
I wish I could.
And I'm so happy for him. So our next meeting would normally be May the 14th, and I think,
Yeah,
and
we decided the 13th
so
instead.
yeah. So can people? I think we talked a little bit back and forth, and looks like 13th. We're going to meet on the 13th, which is a little bit different for us. So May the 13th, and we said 5 o'clock, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, I think that so then our next regular scheduled meeting I think would be May the 28th. And my question, we're going to have state executive committee meeting on June the 15th. So what if we have stuff that's ready to go to the state executive committee, it will go to them pretty quickly. But when at the last time we had state executive, we had bylaws presentation, we scheduled a meeting that was not let's do our regular thing. It was a meeting to invite county chairs and committee members and things like that so that we could review the changes and to make sure that people understood them before they had to vote on them. Do we want to try to do that again, and to do that at the May 28 meeting?
I think that's helpful.
Okay.
I think that's helpful.
Anybody else have thoughts one way or the other about that?
I could believe we did did we do 2 sessions of that, if I remember correctly last time? We didn't just do one. I thought we did 2 meetings.
I think you're right, but I can't remember. I think like one of them might have been to a group, maybe the County Chairs Association, and one of them was open to kind of like just a general one. So I think one of them was like specific for a particular group, like we were invited, maybe. I'm not positive about that though.
If possible, could we maybe do a precedent of repeating that process? Look back and see who it was, because I know I'm probably not going to be able to make one of those meetings. Probably won't be able to make that Tuesday. But if there was a second meeting And I remember attending one of them on like the Wednesday or Thursday. I could definitely do that and help out.
Okay. All right, let me see if I can look back and see what we did, but I'm certainly open to that, and we can talk about that a little bit more on when we meet on the 13th. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now the one on the 28th, that's going to be 6:30
Yeah,
28th of,
May.
May.
yeah, I'll be gone. I won't be available for that.
I was trying to think of some clever French phrase, but I can't think any. They say la vie.
Okay. All right. You don't need to send me the document. I found it on my iPad.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Okay. All right. Anything else before we adjourn?
I'm just saying, when that resident jet sitter position comes open, I think Bob's gonna have a lot of competition in that election. So,
Yeah.
and I'd like to throw my name in the
No,
hat. So,
it can come open any year now because I'm getting old.
Hmm.
All right.
Because
Well,
I'm getting old that I want to do it.
well, I feel like I speak for everybody that we're very, very happy for you and Ruth and getting to. You just need to post lots of pictures online.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
So we have completed our agenda, and I don't need to. As far as I know, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. When you finish an agenda, you don't have to. You can go ahead and adjourn. You don't have to ask for a motion. Is that correct?
that is correct. The chair only has to make 2 calls for further business, and hearing none can adjourn on their own prerogative.
Okay, so 2 calls. Thank you. I did not know that. All right, so I think I already made one. Is there another? Here's my second call for new business. Any further business? Okay, so hearing none and considering that we have completed our agenda, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all so much for being on, and let's give Corey a little round of applause. Thank you, Corey, for being here with us this evening and taking care of us and making sure that we're on YouTube and all that good stuff. So we really appreciate you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Of course,
you.
y'all. Have a good night.
Okay.